So today, we talk about tuning. Hi guys, welcome back. Salty Flyer, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, thanks for dropping in. If you're a returning customer, we appreciate you. Thanks for coming by. So today, this all started when I was at the dealership the other day, and I was just hanging out looking for, you know, what one does in the dealership. It was actually, it's on my way home when I ride, so I sometimes poke my head in there, say hi to people, maybe look at a widget I shouldn't buy for the bike. And there's a guy who's buying a new bike. And I was chit-chatting with him, and he was he didn't want to sound like a new guy because he was coming off of like a small little Honda Rebel, and he was buying a Road Glide, and he was really excited about it. And he had a bunch of questions, and I think he just didn't necessarily, he felt if he asked the dealer, they were going to try to sell him something, so he wanted a second opinion. And he asked me, hey man, if I put slip-ons on my bike, do I need to tune it? So that started letting me think about tuners, because to be honest with you, the best performing video I've ever made on this channel involves tuning. So I figured today we'll do a deep dive on tuning, you know, with the following caveats. All this information has come from product websites, reviews, research, talking to Harley technicians, talking to independent mechanics, and all of that. So take everything I say with a grain of salt, do your own homework. None of this is coming from an expert. I am not a dyno tuner. I am just a dude that rides a bike. Okay, so let's get started. So to answer his question, if I put slip-ons on my 26 Street Glide that I'm buying, or Road Glide that I'm buying, do I need to tune the bike? No. Okay, so today we'll start with some basics. So I'm gonna do chapters in this video, so I'll timestamp this, so you can skip ahead, or the beginning part's gonna be pretty basic, because I'm gonna lay it out for everybody basic style, and then we'll move on from there. So let's get started. How does the electronic fuel injection in your bike work, in your M8, and to a lesser extent in your twin cam? Well, the really simple, 60 seconds or less version of it is, you twist the throttle body opens, air goes into the intake manifold. A sensor called a manifold absolute pressure sensor measures the pressure in there, which is calibrated for your intake, and sends a signal into the electronic control unit, or engine control unit, excuse me, or ECU, saying this is how much air I got. Inside there, it's loaded with a lookup table called a volumetric efficiency table, or VE table, where it has one axis is RPM, one axis is map pressure readings. And it goes across that, references your RPM, and says, yep, yea verily, I shall inject this much fuel. Fuel's injected to the engine, and life is good. The ratio of fuel to air has an ideal efficiency point where the mixture of this much air to this much fuel in the cylinder when the spark fires gives you the best performance. That's ratio. Anything deviating from that, if you add more fuel to it, you've said to make it more rich. If you add more air to it, you're making it more lean. Remember those terms, they'll come back later on. So as your bike is running now, you have two little sensors that are wired into your head pipe. You probably see those wires that are coming out and run into your head pipe. Those are your O2 sensors. They're narrowband O2 sensors, and we'll talk about that later. That will become important. And what they do is once the bike is in what it's called closed loop, they tell the bike, hey, I'm too rich or I'm too lean based on sampling the exhaust gas from what that set point is, and then the ECU will modify it. When I say closed loop, it's because when you first start the bike, they're not warmed up yet, so they can't register, so the bike ignores them, so it's open loop. It just goes to the lookup table and just fires away. Then once it's warmed up, it can then it closes the loop and starts actually adjusting itself based on what it's seeing. That's why it runs better after the bike warms up. Fun fact. So that adjustment is why when you put the slip-ons on, you don't need to tune the bike, because the bike is capable of adjusting up to 10% in either direction. And since if you're running a stock head pipe in the year of our Lord 2026, the EPA has mandated that you shall have a catalytic converter in that head pipe, that's providing all the restriction in the world and all the back pressure in the world. So to be honest, outside of sound, if you don't do the head pipe, slip-ons sound cool, they look cool, they're not gonna do a whole lot regarding the amount of exhaust going through, and the same amount of air is going in. Remember, air and fuel are the things you're really worried about. So you're fine. It'll adjust more easily than that. It'll be fine. You're off to the races. Same reason why you can ride the bike over a mountain pass and it's not gonna run like shit at the top of the mountain, because it's within that 10% adjustment factor. Got it? Okay, so now we get to what happens if I wanna do stage one. I did stage 1 on my bike. Harley stage 1, and it's a made up term, but Harley stage 1 is essentially a high flow air intake and slip-on exhaust. If you do that, do you need to tune the bike? Yes. Okay, anyone who's run the stage run and hasn't tuned their bike and they're like, yo bro, you're all messed up, fine. I'm trying to preserve longevity of my bike. It is a best practice to tune the bike if you do that. Why? Because these bikes come from the factory running very lean, which means less fuel, more air. Why is that? Because our friend, the EPA, remember that jerk off from the Ghostbusters? He's got fingers in everything, man. And it's really hard for these motorcycles, even though motorcycles make almost no emissions, for them to pass the standards that the EPA, and by EPA I mean California, has created. So what they do to help themselves is they run the bikes lean. Less fuel going in means less stuff coming out the tailpipe, means polar bears are happy, or so they tell me. So lean also means hot. The fuel in the mixture actually acts as a coolant inside the engine. So it's going to run hotter. Hotter is bad. Hotter is badness. So if you put that intake on and you don't tune it, what's gonna happen is it's gonna go to its non-calibrated table. It's gonna say, great, I'm doing this, boom, and I'm gonna put the scheduled fuel in just like normal, and your O2 sensors are gonna go, whoa boss, we're really, really lean, and it's gonna try to crank up the richening, but it only has that 10% margin of error, and you're gonna need more than that. So you're gonna be running hot, you might have detonation, it's just not goodness. So if you did it without a tune, your bike's running good, you may have to look at what your definition of good is. So now we get to the tuner. So what kind of tuner do you want to use? Well, there's two questions you have to ask yourself. One, what kind of build do I want to do? Am I just doing stage 1 and done? Am I going to put a cam in it? Or am I going full crazy? I'm doing jugs, I'm doing ported heads, I'm doing maybe a turbo, just whatever. That'll drive your decision. And also, is your bike new and is it under warranty? And do you like that warranty and want to keep it? If the answer to that question is yes, then the first question doesn't really matter. Your choices for warranty compliance is the Harley Davidson Screaming Eagle Pro Street Tuner. And that's the first one we're going to talk about right now. That's what I have on my bike. That's what I have the most experience on. Hell, my video on smart tuning with it is the best performing video I've ever made on this channel. So obviously some people are interested in it. So what does it do? I'll show you some footage of it from the old video, but essentially you pop the left side cover off. There's a data port plug in there, plugged into a blank off. You take it out, you plug it in, it Bluetooths to your phone, and you're off to the races. How does it tune? Well, you start with a base map. So you go in there and you tell it what you have. So it goes, hey, in my case, I'm a 117 center cooled, so Gen 2, and I have slip-on exhaust and intake. Now it's gonna say Screaming Eagle intake, which I actually do have, and Screaming Eagle slip-ons, which I don't. I've got tab 4.5-inch BAM sticks, but to be perfectly honest with you, I don't think for stage 1 it matters a whole hill of beans. It's really the intake and the air that's going in that's really the part that it's concerned with. And then it's gonna reflash the bike with that new map, which is recalibrated, and now you've got enough fuel to compensate for the more air going in. Easy. Yeah, there's a couple of gotchas. You got to make sure you're good power, make sure you're on the 5-amp trickle charger because you are flashing the ECU, and if it's stuck midway through, your ECU is bricked, and you got to tow the bike over to Harley to get them to reload your ECU, which kind of sucks. But as long as you follow the instructions, it's relatively easy. Then you have an additional option of doing a smart tune. That smart tune allows you to basically set the bike up, you have to flash again into kind of a record mode, in which case it sets everything kind of back to baseline, then you ride around. And one mistake I made was I was doing it with my phone in the drawer. I highly recommend, if you're gonna do a smart tune, to have your phone mounted on your handlebars with the screen open so you can see it, because it's gonna show you a grid, and it's basically just kind of like a poor man's dyno. You're gonna go different throttle positions, different gears, different speeds, and it's basically sampling how the engine's doing in all of those circumstances. When you're done with that recording, or several, you can push a button on the app when you're done, and it sends that up into the cloud gonculates, and it customizes and tweaks your tune. You'll see actually on there squares on that VE table that are colored saying, hey, I changed something. So it's doing something. Was it mind-blowing after I smart tuned it? I don't know, it felt like it ran better. The other thing that smart tuner can do is it allow you to see codes. So if you don't have a bike with the Jumbotron on it where it's not real easy to see codes, you can see codes. And on your phone, it will allow you to, if you have the phone mount, see a bunch of engine parameters that are not displayed on gauges. So you can see all kinds of stuff that the ECU is processing, but it's not displayed to you. So that's kind of neat if you really kind of want to deep dive on how your engine works. Pretty straightforward. You can also, by the way, go with a Y cable that you can buy from Harley, and then you can plug into that and also use a computer, your laptop, to see what's going on. So what are the goods and others? Good number one, probably the primary good, your warranty is preserved. With the assumption that you're using Harley parts, no one I've ever talked to, no dealership I've ever talked to said that short of you being a colossal asshat, are they ever gonna give you a hard time over slip-ons? They're just not. So as long as you use Harley parts and you put it on there, you're fine, warranty is preserved. The other good is it's relatively easy to use. Yes, you may have to download some stuff from the, may have to download an update, and yes, you may actually have to mess around with your Bluetooth a little bit, but overall, it's a pretty easy, straightforward thing. And you can't really hurt the bike, which leads to the others. There's a lot of parameters that you may want to change that you cannot touch with the Screaming Eagle tuner. You can't change the rev limiter, for example. You cannot remove the fuel or the speed limiter on the new touring bikes. I think it's like 110 miles an hour. You can't change that. Also, if you're gonna go past stage 1, you're pretty limited to the Harley ecosystem. What do I mean? Say you wanna throw a cam, which is what Harley determines as stage 2 for these bikes. For the 24 and up street glide, road glide crowd, that's the 511 cam. That's it, that's the only one they have a map for. I think for the older M8s, it's got where they have the torque cam and the horsepower cam, but they're only gonna have maps built for the Harley cams. So I am not a super big expert, but I'm pretty sure that if you were to put a cam, say like a SNS 475 cam in, and then load a map for a 511 lift cam, it's probably not gonna run great. So that kind of limits you to the Harley ecosystem. So that's probably the biggest limitation. If you wanna grow past that, or you wanna have more control, the Screaming Eagle may not be for you. The other for the Screaming Eagle is, it is an EPA legal tuner. Harley got the shit suit out of them by the government when they were selling aftermarket tuners and doing things that were allowing bikes to not meet EPA requirements, because if you tune your bike, a polar bear dies, or so they tell me. So now I'll caveat with one thing. If you're putting stage 1 on your bike, it's to make it look good, sound good, maybe breathe a little bit better and run maybe a little cooler. It's not to generate shit tons of power. That said, this setup here will never generate as much power with the Screaming Eagle tuner as it would with any aftermarket tuner, because the Screaming Eagle tuner prioritizes EPA compliance, emissions compliance over making power. It's also probably, while it's getting it, if you put the air intake on and tune it with the tuner, the Screaming Eagle tuner, it'll get it out of that dangerously lean condition. It's still probably leaner than you might want to run it, and that's just the nature of the beast with the Pro Street tuner, okay? Hi guys, Future Salty here. While editing the video, I realized that I forgot to mention something. The Harley Davidson Screaming Eagle tuner, there is a module you can buy that does have wideband O2 sensors that you can plug in, and you can use them for auto tune, which we talk about later in the video. But understand that even with that, you're still limited by all the EPA rules that the Screaming Eagle Pro Street tuner is limited to. So thought I'd bring that up, forgot to mention it. Now, back to the video. So that's the Screaming Eagle tuner. Now we move on to the aftermarket. There's really two kind of big categories of tuners in the aftermarket. And we'll start with the first one, which is a piggyback style tuner. So the biggest known name for that is the DynoJet, it's the Power Commander. Well, when I say piggyback, what it means is this is a module that you're gonna plug in line to the bike. It's not gonna talk to the ECU at all. So the ECU is gonna stay stock flash. You put your parts on it, you load a map into it, say whatever parts you put on there. And then when the bike's running, the ECU is gonna say business as usual. It doesn't know that it's got a high flow air intake, to use the stage 1 example. So it's gonna send out a signal like it didn't, like, hey, this is the amount of fuel you need to schedule. The tuner intercepts that signal and tweaks it and says, what he meant to say was more fuel, or whatever parameters you run there. And that's how that works. It's pretty simple. It doesn't tune the ECU, it just intercepts the signal coming out of the ECU to the various modules of the bike and tweaks that signal and modifies it so it sends a slightly different signal causing those modules to do slightly different things. So the goodness, so what are the goods and others of this? The goods and others of this, one of the goods is that, and this is true of all aftermarket tuners, the world is now kind of your oyster. There's a ton more maps for parts, for cams, for pipes, for combinations of cams and pipes and intakes and heads and jugs and all these different things. There's now an infinite number of base maps out there, and you can talk to it, you can talk to them, and they may even have one that they didn't load, or they can send you one, or they'll gin one up. So tons of freedom. And this is true of all of them, but definitely for the Power Commander, for the Piggyback style tuner. The other good is, and I am not, so I'm gonna say this right now, I will never guarantee, nothing in this video, this is the Salty Flyer legal department, can tell you that this is guaranteed to preserve your warranty other than the Screaming Eagle Pro Street tuner, because that's written by Harley to preserve your warranty. Everything else, you run the risk of losing warranty coverage for changing it. But if you take the Piggyback tuner off the bike, you disconnect it, the tune is gone because you didn't touch the ECU. The ECU has never been operating any differently, so if they plug it into the digital technician, it's gonna say, yeah, I'm fine, no one's messed with me. That said, that's one of the others of this system too, is when you disconnect it, it stops working. So if you've got a cam and an airbox and pipes, and you suddenly say, I'm gonna ride this thing down to the dealership with that disconnected, it's gonna run like shit, just so you know. Run like shit to the border of damaging things. Another good of this system is it does allow you to have a wideband O2 sensor setup. We'll talk more about that when we talk about the next style of tuner, but that's a goodness thing. That gives you the ability to auto-tune, and no, I don't mean like Flo Rida singing, I mean like auto-tune the bike, which is a useful thing. The other is kind of tied to it has to stay on the bike, so you can't not disconnect it. So you got to find a spot under your seat and zip tie it in and make sure all the wires are snugged up and good so that it can do that. Another other is, and this one is more for the older bikes. Older bikes, you may have to disconnect your O2 sensors and run continuously an open loop because it can get into an argument with if you think about it, the ECU is saying, put this much fuel in, it doesn't know that the Piggyback tuner is telling it, yeah, no, put more in. So then the O2 sensors, which are designed to what the ECU tells them to do, says, oh, wait, we're rich, lean it up. So then it leans it up, so then the Piggyback says, no, add more, and it gets into a loop. Most of those newer tuners say that that is solved. So talk to Power Commander to see, everything I've read on their website, and I sent them an email researching this video, and they said, no, that's fine. You can actually run in closed loop now with the O2 sensors connected. So that's good. Another issue, which may or may not be true for the new bikes, has been historically true for the older bikes with this, and probably the biggest issue with these kind of Piggyback style tuners, is the whole electrical system on the bike runs on what's called a CAN bus. So the bus is basically the electronics superhighway of the bike. It's a loop, everything's connected, it has one infinite ground, and everything talks to everything. And the way the ECU or the infotainment center, all those boxes know each other's theirs based on resistance. They know that each module in the bus has X amount of resistance for being there without getting too deep into the electrical weeds. If you add something in line, now the system is going to measure more resistance than it's expecting. Now, maybe it's fine with that and it just goes along happy about its business, but maybe it goes, I don't like that, something's wrong, I think I got a short, here's 15 codes and you're stuck in limp home mode. Now the goodness of that is you can always, to get it back out of that, is you can just disconnect it, but if it starts getting into that loop often, then you might be every other ride disconnecting your tuner, and that's kind of a thing. So once again, talk to your, whatever tuner you're buying, really reach out and do your homework with them to see if it really plays along nicely with your bike. So now that brings us to the next style of tuner, which is flash tuners. So the biggest examples you'll see out there are Fuel Pack or Power Vision. Those are kind of the big ones. There's others out there, there's plenty of others out there, but those are the ones that kind of, the first ones you Google, that's what's gonna pop up. They work almost exactly the same as the Pro Street tuner for Harley, just it's not Harley. So in other words, what does that mean? It goes in and it takes the map and it reprograms the ECU. It recalibrates those tables in the ECU to account for your new gear. All of the other goods from the previous apply. There's a ton more of maps that you can get on those that can flash in there. So you have a lot more combinations available to you. You have the ability to take it to a dyno tuner and get that tuned. And we'll talk about that as a whole separate thing, dyno tuning, which is what I recommend for everyone, especially if you have an aggressive build. So you can flash it, you can do it multiple times. They also run the ability to auto tune with wideband O2 sensors. So we may as well talk about that now. They sell kits with the PowerVision, for instance, that allow you to remove your narrowband O2 sensors, which are, little guys, little nubbins that stick into your exhaust pipe, with big, strong, wideband O2 sensors, which pass a lot more information, a lot more data real time, which allows the tuner to auto-tune the bike. So remember how Smart Tune, it said like, we just rode around, it took some recordings, and at the end of the day, it calculated all of that and said, these are the things I would change, and then created a map after the fact. Auto-tune allows you to modify the map real time while you're riding. It's looking at a position, goes, I don't like that, I'm gonna enrich that, I'm gonna change this, I'm gonna tweak that. So that's a kind of really neat feature to have. Problem with the wideband O2 sensors is you gotta have a place to put them. Your stock head pipe does not have the appropriate bungs for it. So what does that mean? Either you need a head pipe that does, and most new head pipes, like your Tab Redlines or your Chromeworks, any of those newer head pipes are gonna have bungs welded on there for both narrowband and wideband, so that you can use whichever one you have, and then you cap off the other bung that's not in use. I know, I didn't say plug. I didn't say plug. If not, then you need to either learn how to drill and weld those on or go to a shop and have it done to put those in there. But if you have those, that allows you a lot of flexibility to auto-tune, which is a really key feature. Plus you can put base maps on, plus you can go get it dyno tuned, which like I said is the gold standard. So what are the goods and others? Like we said, the goods of this kind of tuning is it is wide. The world is your oyster. You have lots and lots of options of things that, combinations, and there's tons of companies out there. And if you reach out and say, I've got XYZ pipe and XYZ intake and XYZ cam, they probably have a map for you, or they can generate one for you. The other is, if you're not going to a dyno tuner, the handcuffs are off. You can absolutely hurt your motorcycle. You have opened Pandora's box. You've got the keys to the cabin. You can change anything. So like on the good side, you can change things like, you can change where your rev limiter kicks in. You can get rid of that speed limiter. You can change a bunch of stuff, but you can also change a bunch of stuff that'll really can get the bike messed up. So if you don't know what you're doing, going in there and just tweaking stuff, buyer beware. So that's an other. The other is obviously tied to warranty. So even though it saves your stock ECU map when you flash it to the new one, and you can always reverse back to that, which you could do if something isn't the new map, it isn't running right, it's kind of a safety feature. It's not there to preserve your warranty, because if they plug into digital tuner or the digital technician, the ECU will tell Harley that that ECU has been flashed, and they know that they didn't do it, and they know that you don't have a Pro Street tuner hooked up to it, so you've tweaked it. And here's the thing about the warranty. This is one thing I did hear from a tech, and sworn to secrecy, because the bosses a lot of times don't like them talking about this because it's kind of a sore subject. But the way it's connected, it doesn't matter if your service tech is a bro or the owner of the dealership's your brother-in-law. If they connect it up to the digital technician, which is their tool to talk to your ECU and to your bike, that's connected to the cloud. And if it has a flag that you changed something in the ECU that's not Harley approved, it bypasses the dealership altogether. That goes straight up into the interwebs directly to the headquarters, and your VIN is flagged in your powertrain. And from what he told me, they determine your powertrain basically as from the air intake to the tailpipe, and also the pulley. So basically you're saying intake, engine, transmission, primary, pulley, belt, and if they want to be dicks about it, the rear wheel. So that's a lot of, and the exhaust. That's a huge piece of the bike that now is not under warranty, so be cautious. Not saying they will do it. It's also not saying that they will absolutely deny any warranty claim on your powertrain forever, but now that it's flagged, it's gonna get a lot more scrutiny, and there's a much higher likelihood that they're gonna say, nah, sorry, you changed something. So proceed with caution, I will say. Other than that, they're great. There's tons of maps, and they allow for dyno tuning. There's the third category of tuners is what represented best by Thundermax. That doesn't flash your ECU, and that doesn't piggyback on your ECU. That just straight up replaces your ECU. You literally open up the side cover, you unplug the Harley ECU, about yay big, slip that into a desk drawer, plug the new one up, load up your laptop, tell it what map to load, and you're off to the races. So it does all of the same stuff as a flash tuner, but it doesn't, your ECU is unmolested. So theoretically, if you wanted to, when you sold the bike and you wanted to put everything back to stock, you could put all your parts back to stock, put your old ECU back in, and basically now it's a stock bike again. Because we all know that everyone keeps their stock slip-ons. Always. Their stock mufflers are, yeah, anyway. So we're good to that. Once again, godlike control over the bike with all the caveats of you can mess it up, but also those Thundermax, specifically on the newer bikes, you have to run wideband O2 sensors. They don't run the narrow band. So you have that as a thing, like you gotta make sure that's installed, but then you also, it gives you the ability to auto tune, which is pretty sweet. The only issues, big issues other than cost, that's the biggest other with Thundermaxes, is they're pretty expensive. They're well over $1,000 for that. So that's not inexpensive, especially when you think about like, you can get all the stage 1 parts if you're doing a stage 1 for about $1,000 if you're not doing a head pipe. So, yeah, that is. The other issue, and this one is one I would contact them and talk to them and really be in touch with them over, is lately I've heard anecdotally that when you're updating the software, say on the infotainment system, this is really a 24 and up kind of touring specific problem, that sometimes because the VIN, it's supposed to assign the VIN to the VIN is assigned to the ECU, I should say. It's not liking the Thundermax occasionally, and it's having some weird tweaks. Not like bricking the bike or making it not run, but just kind of weird stuff. Like I think people are saying their GPS module wouldn't work and it wouldn't allow them to connect to the Wi-Fi to download the update, and just weird stuff like that. So just something to consider, something to reach out to them and say, hey, this is what I got. What are the issues you're dealing with specific to that tuner? And you should be off to the races. So you've got your Harley, you've got your piggyback tuners, you've got your flash tuners, and now you've got your ECU replacers. And I will show examples of all those, links to all those different examples of that type in the description. So the last thing to talk about is dyno tuning. I strongly recommend dyno tuning, and I strongly recommend dyno tuning with someone who knows what they're doing. It gives you the best performance from your build. So the base map is good, but if you want it to be the best, it's like doing an auto tune or like doing a smart tune, but it's in a controlled environment. So the dyno tuner knows he can put it on the dynamometer, which is that big drum thing where you can rev it up inside if you've never seen one. And they can run that all manner of RPMs, all manner of gears. They can do pulls and they can really fill in all those gaps and really get good information and make a custom tune to your bike. To be honest, that's what they're doing when they write the base map, but this one will be basically a map written for your bike with your exact configuration in your environment. So I mean, obviously, I guess if you ride your bike, if you live in Florida and you ride your bike to Denver to get it tuned, but so that's what I recommend. So which tuner do you want to buy, Salty? What I would tell you is it honestly depends a little bit on the tuning. Like if you're going to do dyno tune, then I would call the guys at the independent shop. So this is a thing that's slightly changed, at least my local dealership. I can't speak for the motor company writ large, but they have a dyno at the dealership. They will no longer tune anything other than Screaming Eagle. They will not use the dyno to tune with any other system. So go find your local independent who does dyno tuning, ask around, go to bike night, talk to club guys, talk to a bunch of different people and figure out kind of who's the local, and then go talk to them. Because some guys will say, hey, run what you brung. I'll tune Thundermax, I'll tune dyno, I'll tune Power Vision, I'll tune Fuel Pack, I don't give a shit. Some guys will be like, because I know that Dyno Jet, which makes the dynamometer and makes the Power Vision and Power Commander, actually has a school that these guys can pay to go to learn from them how to tune. They may say, you know what, I only tune with this, or I only tune with Fuel Pack. That's fine. In a lot of cases, what you could do, and what I recommend, Salty's pro tip, is before you start your build, go find who's going to tune it for you, talk to them. They may actually bundle the parts. A lot of these independents who have a dyno are also a shop, and they sell stuff. And a lot of times they're going to be a dealer for the tuner that they like tuning on. So you might go package up a deal. Hey, I bought my Power Vision from you and X number dyno pulls to get it dialed. That's my biggest recommendation. Make sure you have that lined up and dyno tune. It's the best. I mean, it will make a difference. I did that with a much older twin cam bike where we loaded up the base map and it was okay. And then I took it to a dyno tuner, and the only difference was I had a full exhaust. I didn't just do slip-ons. I had a full exhaust system and intake, and I took it to the tuner in town, who's unfortunately no longer in business, which sucks because I haven't moved. And the bike ran infinitely better. I had a lot of decel popping and a lot of other things that were just annoying, and he smoothed it out and it ran better and it pulled harder. So strongly, strongly, strongly recommend getting your bike dyno tuned. So there it is, folks. Sorry for the long one. We made it through. We made it through the Salty's brain dump on tuners. This was our deep dive. Hopefully it was useful. We'll have chapter links in all of this. So if you can want to skip ahead to whatever you think is most interesting to you, that's great. Thanks for sticking around. If you like what we're doing, give us a thumbs up. If you really like what we're doing, subscribe to the channel. It doesn't cost you anything. If you really, really, really like what we're doing, there's a super thanks button now. YouTube allowed me that, so you can throw me a couple of ducats to buy a cup of coffee and go from there, but obviously no obligation. We do this for the love of the game, man. But thanks for coming by. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll talk to you next time. Keep your head on a swivel. Be safe out there. Salty Flyer, peace.